The Nintendo 3DS eShop was home to many digital-only games, from smaller Nintendo projects to cool indie titles, but with its unfortunate closure, many games are now left to be forgotten. Well, not without a little homebrew. So in this video, we're going to take a look at the top 10 best digital-only 3DS eShop games. Now, this list was pretty difficult to create, which is why I'll be considering games that may have had a physical release in Japan, and if a game has already been re-released on other platforms beyond the 3DS, it can still secure a spot. And I'll also throw in some honorable mentions. Anyways, I'm Anton, and let's get started. If you're a fan of the Studio Ghibli films, this game might be right up your alley. Attack of the Friday Monsters: A Tokyo Tale is an adventure game, which blends slice-of-life storytelling with the bizarre. Set in a small town reminiscent of Japanese countryside life in the 1970s, you follow Sota, a young boy who has just moved into the town. But this town has one problem: giant monsters appear every Friday. If you're looking for sword fighting and complex RPG mechanics, you'll find none of that here. The gameplay consists of speaking to NPCs to progress the plot and playing card battles against other residents. You must also collect glims, energy shards that allow you to magically obtain new cards after collecting all the glims of a set, giving you more options in the card battles. This game is all about the dialogue, so there's a lot to learn about each character. The game beautifully captures the spirit of discovery and adventure. It might not be the most complicated game out there, but it's all about the story, especially surrounding those monsters, and where they're coming from. Let's hope Level 5 re-releases this game, as I think it would look amazing in HD. Next up are the Ace Attorney games, developed by Capcom, and all released digitally for the eShop. But Japan did get physicals. These games fall into the visual novel adventure genre. We've got Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney Trilogy, Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney Dual Destinies, Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney Spirit of Justice, and Apollo Justice Ace Attorney. Yeah, the names can be kinda confusing. So starting with the Ace Attorney Trilogy, it consists of remade versions of the first 3 games on the DS. Moving beyond the trilogy, Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney Dual Destinies brings players into the legal system in a dark era, filled with false charges and fabricated evidence. Meanwhile, Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney Spirit of Justice follows Phoenix Wright as he travels to the kingdom of Kurion, dealing with its weird court system, while Apollo and Athena are left to watch over the agency in his absence. Dual Destinies and Spirit of Justice also received additional DLC narratives, adding more cases. And the final Ace Attorney game released for 3DS in North America is Apollo Justice Ace Attorney, which is a remaster of the DS original. In this game, players take on the role of Apollo as he tackles various legal cases and unravels mysteries within the courtroom. But these are all great games. They are charming and can get really weird. All these games have since made their way to multiple platforms. They look great in HD and offer the best way to play. Next up, we've got the Denpa Men Trilogy, comprising the Denpa Men That Came by Wave, the Denpa Men 2 Beyond the Waves, and the Denpa Men 3 The Rise of Digital. Now, I've decided to group them all together, as it makes the list more interesting, but also the games are very similar to each other. The first installment, the Denpa Men They Came by Wave, introduces us to the Denpa Men, creatures that are like a combination between Pikmin and Miis, but live among the radio waves and can only be seen with a Nintendo 3DS. Developed by Genius Sonority, responsible for Pokemon Colosseum, and more recently Pokemon Cafe Remix, the game is a dungeon crawler similar to Pokemon Mystery Dungeon. Players capture Denpa Men using the 3DS's AR capabilities, forming a squad to take on the King of Evil. If you've played Miitopia before, the battles are pretty similar. But one thing that the game does quite differently when compared to Pokemon Mystery Dungeon and Miitopia is that when a Denpa Men dies, and once you leave the dungeon, it will be lost. Visiting a shrine will allow you to revive lost Denpa Men, in exchange for offerings which can be bought with gold. But next up we have the Denpa Men 2 Beyond the Waves. Built upon the success of its predecessor, it introduces improvements and expands the game's world. Upon starting the game, you can import your first Denpa Men into the sequel, which is pretty cool. But there's a bunch of new features here, like gardening. The story takes place a while after the previous game, as the protagonist's family, including their 2 kids, is kidnapped by monsters. The previous game had a few small online features, but this one takes it up a notch. Not that they work anymore, but still it's cool. And finally, we've got the Denpa Men 3, The Rise of Digital, marked as the pinnacle of the series. Believed to be a prequel to the first game, you'll need to gather a squad of Denpa men to rescue your childhood friend. The Denpa men now live in houses across the island, so when you catch them, you build out the town. But overall, this series is a lot of fun. It's charming and unique. The series then received a Japanese-only 4th game, titled The Denpa Men for free, for the 3DS, and then a Japanese-only mobile game, titled The New Denpa Men. In 2024, there will be a new game released for the Nintendo Switch, titled The New Denpa Men Free. It seems to be similar to the Japanese-only mobile release, but it looks like it will only be released in Japan, so I hope we do get a localized version. But since the franchise is no longer dead, I do hope we can get a Denpa Men Trilogy released for the Switch, as that would be really cool. The next game is quite the obscure one, and that's Kettles Corridors, also known as Speed Through, Hot Souls Puzzle. Like, why is it always the Europeans? Was Kettles Corridors too simple? Anyways, this game developed by Keys Factory and published by Nintendo is a sequel to Through Space released on the eShop channel. Described as a third-person on-rails Tetris, you have to move a 3D shape made out of a few blocks, attempting to get through each hole without missing. The key is to move it around with as few moves as possible, as you have limited time. There are many different worlds to explore containing different stages. From long ones to smaller challenge stages, this game offers a ton of variety. Through Space on the Wii has a very simple art style, so for this next game in the series, the devs decide to go for something more unique. I like the Aztec aesthetic, with nice visuals and music. It also uses the stereoscopic 3D really well, just like a lot of other 3DS games near the system's launch. But this is one Nintendo game that is often forgotten about, so if you're able to, do check it out. Next up, we've got the Gunman Clive series, consisting of Gunman Clive and Gunman Clive 2. These games, developed by Bertil Horberg, I hope I'm saying that right, are 2D side-scrolling platformers that take players on Wild West adventures. The games are very similar to Mega Man with tight platforming, so you'll need to remember the level layout to have an easier time. In the first game, you can choose to play as Gunman Clive or Miss Johnson, as they traverse through levels filled with enemies, obstacles, and platforming challenges, with players using a limited set of moves to jump, shoot, and dodge. There are even different guns to collect, which have different firing effects. Despite its simplicity, Gunman Clive received praise for its engaging gameplay, unique artistic direction, and its creative boss battles. But then it got a sequel, Gunman Clive 2, as it continues the adventure with new levels, characters, and challenges. I like the emphasis on the steampunk style. The level design is great, and I like the use of colors. Whether you're a fan of westerns or classic platformers, both Gunman Clive titles are excellent. Both games have been released on multiple platforms as part of the Gunman Clive HD collection, which I do recommend checking out. Next up, we have Pocket Card Jockey, developed by Game Freak and published by Nintendo. This game is quite unique and somewhat perplexing. Merging solitaire with horse racing is somewhat bizarre, but it works much better than you'd expect. You take on the role of a jockey who gets kicked by a horse and nearly dies. That's literally what happens at the beginning, I'm not joking. After being encouraged and assisted, you begin racing for multiple racehorse owners, managing and improving their horses over the years. But this game is so much fun, especially with that music. The goal is to finish the game of solitaire as fast as possible, where quick and error-free card play is crucial. When you finish a game of solitaire as fast as possible, your horse then gets a boost. The game also includes a farm mode, where retired horses can be bred to develop future racers. Despite its quirks, Pocket Card Jockey is a fun and unique game. To those who enjoy addictive puzzle and card games, I definitely recommend checking this one out. But if you don't have a 3DS, there's actually a remake titled Pocket Card Jockey Ride On, which was released in 2023 for Apple Arcades, and it's also been released in 2024 for the Nintendo Switch, so make sure to check it out. Next up, we have SteamWorld Dig 1 and 2. The first game, SteamWorld Dig, blends platforming with digging mechanics. Controlling the character Rusty, a robot in a mechanical world, the primary goal is to mine and collect precious materials from the randomly generated underground mines, selling them on the surface to obtain currency. The currency is then used to purchase upgrades, enhancing Rusty's equipment and abilities, enabling further exploration into the depths. It's quite a fun and rewarding gameplay loop. SteamWorld Dig 2 builds upon its predecessor with a handcrafted world, departing from procedural generation. This time round, you play as Dorothy, and you gotta help her find all sorts of treasure. This game introduces new mechanics, with new equipment and customization options. There's a brand new fast travel system that eases exploration, and there's also plenty of post-game content. Now, while not part of the Dig series and not debuting on the 3DS eShop like its predecessors, SteamWorld Heist deserves a mention. This game is a turn-based strategy RPG within a world of spacefaring robots. It is pretty fun, but I vastly prefer the Dig games. All of these games have found their way to various platforms, including the Nintendo Switch, allowing more players to enjoy these games in nice HD. Next up, we have Cave Story. This game has been released on many platforms. You play as a young protagonist in the deep depths. The gameplay is similar to Metroid and Blaster Master, featuring challenging platforming, weapon upgrades, and boss encounters. Your arsenal includes diverse weapons and gadgets, with an upgrade system reminiscent of Blaster Master. This version of the game features many modes, including the Boss Rush, Sanctuary Time Attack, Curly Story, Wind Fortress, and Nemesis Challenge modes, with the latter two from Cave Story Plus. So a lot of content here. Despite some graphical changes when compared to other versions, the 3D display definitely compensates. Next up, we've got the Boy Trilogy, puzzle games developed for the 3DS by HAL Laboratory and published by Nintendo. The trilogy consists of Box Boy, Box Boy, and Bye Bye Box Boy, and I've grouped them all together due to them being very similar and almost like parts in a way. In Box Boy, the first game, you control QB, a small box-shaped character as you navigate through levels filled with puzzles. You can generate a series of connected boxes, creating platforms, bridges, and shields. The game starts with straightforward puzzles, gradually introducing new mechanics and bumping up the difficulty. You can earn medals by collecting all the crowns in a level, or using as few boxes as possible. There are so many well-designed puzzles here that I'm impressed the developers could come up with so many unique ideas. With the medals you earn, you can buy all sorts of stuff at the shop, from costumes to challenge levels. I really like the minimalistic black and white visuals and unique soundtrack, as they set the game apart from many other platformer and puzzle games. But HAL still had way more ideas after the first game, as a year later, they released Box Boy. This installment introduces a new game mechanic, as QB can now generate 2 sets of boxes independently, providing new possibilities for solving puzzles. But HAL wasn't done quite yet, as the final game for the 3DS, Box Boy, concludes the Boy Trilogy with yet another wave of inventive puzzles. The developers definitely think outside the box. But overall, the Boy Trilogy is celebrated for its consistent quality in puzzle design, its unique aesthetic, and the gradual introduction of mechanics across each installment. Despite the final 3DS game being called Bye Bye Box Boy, it was not the end for the series, as Box Boy plus Box Girl was released for the Nintendo Switch as the biggest entry to date, with over 270 levels. Now, before we get to the number 1 spot, let's take a look at some honorable mentions. God of Protectors is an action-packed tower defense game for the 3DS. Developed by Ancient and released in 2016, this game introduces players to a fantasy world, under attack by relentless hordes of monsters. As a valiant protector, your mission is to defend the kingdom's crystal from waves of enemies, seeking its destruction. The game cleverly blends elements of traditional tower defense with real-time action, providing a unique and engaging gameplay experience. This game is at its best with multiplayer functionality, allowing up to 4 players to join forces locally. Unfortunately, this game has no online functionality, and it probably wouldn't at this point anyways, but the game is still fun alone. You can choose from a diverse cast of characters, each with unique abilities and playstyles. As you progress, the game offers opportunities to enhance and customize your character. The game features a variety of stages, and you can even import customly built stages, as you can scan QR codes made by other players, as the game does include a level builder, which adds a ton of possibility and endless gameplay to the game. And with QR codes, it doesn't have to rely on any servers. But overall, God of Protectors is a great tower defense game. Since the game's release, there has been a brand new game, titled God of Protectors: Card of Darkness, released for modern platforms. Next up, we have Crimson Shroud. This game was developed by Next Entertainment and Level 5, and designed by Yatsumi Matsuno, known for his work on Final Fantasy Tactics. In the tradition of classic RPGs like Dungeons & Dragons, Crimson Shroud weaves a rich narrative filled with mystery, magic, and intrigue. Narrated from a third-person perspective, the story follows a small group of characters as they navigate a world filled with lore and secrets. Now, I'm not that familiar with D&D, but this is a really cool game. Exploit enemy weaknesses and unravel the mystery of the Shroud, a magical force that influences the world and its inhabitants. This RPG really sets itself apart, as the characters and environments resemble figurines on a game board. The game also features a strategic loot system, where players can uncover various items, artifacts, and equipment throughout their journey, each with their own significance on the potential impact on the characters, abilities, and progression. While it might not be for everyone, especially with its large amount of dialogue and narrative-focused game structure, Crimson Shroud is a really fun and unique game. Next up, we've got Fluidity Spin Cycle, also known as Hydroventure Spin Cycle in Europe. This game is the sequel to the 2010 WiiWare title Fluidity, also known as Hydroventure in Europe. Both games were developed by UK-based Curve Studios for the Wii and 3DS respectively. The game follows Eddie, a puddle of water trapped inside dusty books, on a quest to rescue the rainbow spirits. The 3DS motion controls influence Eddie's movements, requiring players to tilt the console and tap the shoulder buttons for jumping. The game spans 4 worlds, with many levels in each. The faster you complete a level and the more water droplets you obtain, the more stars you'll receive. The audio design is really nice and complements the experience, with lighthearted and enjoyable music tracks that fit the game perfectly. Now, the controls can feel pretty awkward. The Wii game was very easy to control, due to the design of the Wii Remote, but having to completely turn the system 360 degrees can be annoying. But that isn't much of the game's fault, rather the hardware they decided to develop for. But despite these control issues, the game is still a lot of fun to play. Next up, we've got Sakura Samurai Art of the Sword, also known as Hana Samurai Art of the Sword in Europe, and was developed by Grounding Inc. and published by Nintendo. As a young samurai tasked with saving Princess Cherry Blossom, you go on a journey through ancient Japan, exploring many different areas, as well as boss castles and villages. In each level, your goal is to defeat all the enemies, from sword fighters to ninjas. Each bring unique attack styles, which require you to remember them to defeat them more effectively. If you've played Punch-Out before, it's pretty similar. If you build up enough power over time, it allows for special attacks. Throughout the adventure, you'll come across villages, featuring quirky NPCs and various activities, such as upgrading your sword, stocking up on health items, and engaging in street games for coins or prizes. There are also many extras, including the Rock Garden, a mode that tracks steps taken when you walk around with your system. But in conclusion, Sakura Samurai Art of the Sword is definitely a hidden gem among the eShop greats. I love the art style, and it comes to life with the added 3D depth. And the company behind the game, Grounding Inc., has actually had a resurgence recently, developing new games. So it is possible that they can collaborate with Nintendo to remaster the game. Next up, we've got Harmonite, a game developed by Game Freak and published by Nintendo. This is a rhythm platformer game that has you controlling tempo as he navigates levels in sync with melodies and beats. The automatic movement of tempo requires precise jumps and hits, all timed to the music. Collecting magical notes is crucial to passing levels and overcoming obstacles on the overworld map. There's a bunch of variety here, with minecart and aerial segments. The music is a bit of a mixed bag. Some tracks are great, but most of them are not memorable. Although the game does have some Pokemon levels, so that's pretty neat. The art style is charming, and the character designs are really distinct. But overall, Harmonite is a great rhythm game. While it may not provide a difficult challenge and the music isn't that memorable, it's something that I definitely recommend playing. Now I want to take a moment to talk about 2 games which were digitally only released in America, but did have physical editions in Europe and Japan. Those games being Rhythm Heaven Megamix and Picross 3D Round 2. Rhythm Heaven Megamix is a rhythm-based game offering a collection of over 100 minigames where players synchronize their actions with the beat of the music. These minigames vary in complexity. The better your timing is, the more points you'll get. It's a perfect game for the 3DS, especially with the 3D display. Picross 3D Round 2 is a puzzle game and the sequel to the DS title Picross 3D. Using the stylus, players strategically chip away at blocks to reveal 3D objects. There's a bunch of different modes catering to different skill levels, and the game's presentation is fantastic. And I like all of the creative models. HAL Laboratory and Nintendo did a great job on this one, which is why you'll find additional Nintendo puzzles by scanning in compatible amiibo. And finally, at the number 1 spot is the Pushmo Trilogy, which consists of Pushmo, Crashmo, and Stretchmo. I've decided to group them together in a single spot due to their similarities. So Pushmo, also known as Pull Blocks in Europe, is a puzzle game developed by Intelligent Systems and published by Nintendo for the 3DS. In this game, players control Mallow, a dog-like creature in a red sumo outfit, where players can pull out colors of a puzzle, creating makeshift staircases and platforms to reach the top, where a child is trapped. The puzzles start simple but gradually become more complex, introducing new mechanics which shake up the gameplay, and there are a bunch of really cool designs for the levels. The game lets you create your own levels, allowing players to design their puzzles using a grid on the touchscreen, and share them through QR codes. It works really well, and it's great when a game does this. It effectively adds an infinite amount of content, and because it uses QR codes, you don't have to rely on Nintendo's servers. Next up is Crashmo, also known as Fall Blocks, the sequel to Pushmo, which introduces new mechanics to the puzzle-solving formula. In this game, players once again help Mallow, but this time rescuing birds by manipulating blocks. Unlike Pushmo, Crashmo allows sliding blocks in all different directions, making blocks fall to create a route, as physics are now at play. The camera control is improved, allowing players to rotate and zoom. The difficulty level increases faster than in Pushmo, which makes it a really good sequel. And like the first game, you can once again build puzzles and share them through QR codes. And finally, we've got Stretchmo, also known as Full Blocks in Europe. Like, what's with this renaming? Like, how is Fall Blocks and Full Blocks that different? This game is labeled as a free-to-start game, which offers 7 level tutorials for free, with additional content requiring a transaction. Stretchmo retains the core gameplay of manipulating structures made out of Tetris-like blocks, but it introduces the ability to stretch blocks from various directions, adding extra depth to the gameplay, literally. Because it's a free-to-start game, there are a bunch of level packs here, which all provide a different mix of levels. Like the other games in the series, the option to create and share levels through QR codes add to the game's replay value. I just don't really get the free-to-start model here, as a standard demo would have worked better. But overall, the Pushmo series is excellent. There's also a digital-only Wii U sequel called Pushmo World, which is basically Pushmo in HD with online features. But anyways, that's about it for the video. I hope you did enjoy it, and if you did, make sure to leave a like and subscribe, as it always helps out. Have you played any of these games before? Well, let me know. And with that, I will see you all in the next one.